Coming up in the latest episode of Netball Unlocked, we take a look back at round 2 with the help of our latest guest and Sky Sports' newest commentator, Lucy Goodman. 3 blowouts and an absolute nail-biter for us to take a look at. We'll speak to one of the stars of the early weeks of the season. That's Manchester Thunder super shot supreme Elmere van der Berg. And we'll preview round 3 too and answer your questions as well, because you've been sending them in your droves. Hello and welcome along to episode 6, Chloe, is that right?
That is correct, episode 6.
You're our numbers person, very much so. Good and bad. So yeah, episode 6, and you'll see we've got a guest alongside us, branded up as well, I'm pleased to say. It's Sky Sports commentator Lucy Goodman. I was going to reel off your resume, but why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, first of all, what you do, how your life is consumed by netball, and then we'll get into it.
Yeah, I mean, life being consumed by netball probably sums it up quite nicely, to be honest. Look, I sort of call myself a bit of a jack of all trades of the netball world. I do commentary, I do arena hosting, I'm a coach, I'm an umpire. I like to dabble in a bit of content creation as well. So anything that will pay my bills in netball, you'll probably find my face there. So yeah, that's me.
What's your favourite thing to do in netball?
Hands down, commentary. I absolutely love it. Any opportunity. Yeah, when I first started, I think the first commentary game I ever did was with Lucy P, the co-host of Quarter Time podcast, and it was a London Pulse under-21 MPL game, I think it was. And we didn't have a clue what we were doing. We just had a great time, just chatting netball, like, wow, great goal. And I don't know what we were saying. And it just kind of grew from there. I got the bug for it. And yeah, fast forward a few years and Sky Sports.
Now look at you, yeah.
Tell us a bit about that, because I've been telling anybody that will listen, I think you are one of the great successes of women's sports, because there's so many people. I think, sport for women is a bit of a startup, and it requires people with a work ethic like yours to try their hands at so many things. And, you have that bug, but you run with it and you work really hard at it and you try all of these things. And, you're kind of at the pinnacle of commentary, really taking on the Sky Sports gig. Tell me a little bit about the hard work that actually, went into that, and how they approached you. Like, give us a little, lift the lid, if you will.
Yeah, I mean, hard work is correct. Even like last weekend, I was doing the national schools finals again for England netball with under 19s and under 14s. I ended up doing, and I've done that for a few years in a row now. Like similar things with school games, world school games. And I'm not exaggerating when I say it is non-stop commentary from 9 a.m. till about 4:30, 5 p.m. You get one 15-minute break. There's a 2-minute break between games, which ends up being about a minute and a half by the time you've wrapped up and introed the next one. So it is just non-stop. And it's those kind of things that you really do have to graft at. And I think for me, I really like to challenge myself, and I like to try and seize every opportunity that I can. And I think as well, coming from a theatre and performance background has really helped. And when I sort of got into netball again in sort of 2018, when Roses won Commonwealth Games, it's been like the perfect marriage really of my history and what I've grown up doing on the stage, and then my passion for netball. And it feels like I've now kind of found that perfect middle ground really, that I hopefully speaks to my skill set. Hopefully I don't do too bad of a job. And yeah, so just kind of worked my way up, done every gig that I can, done some men's international fixtures as well, Elmere Nationals from the inaugural event in 2021, I think it was. I've been commentator along with Lucy P every single year. Went out with the Thorns to St Kitts and Nevis in September last
Nice
year.
Gig.
Yeah, great gig. So commentated all of them. That was just voluntary. Done national schools, national clubs, MPL, literally just anything I can get my hands on. And then I think for me, this is just my opinion, I could be wrong, but last season when Team Bath obviously received the news that they weren't going to be part of the Super League moving forwards, there was a last minute call made by the Super League that all the departing teams could stream their final home game. And I happened to be there anyway, hosting a Q&A with some of the players and Asha Francis. And I remember driving down, it was like 4:30 or something. I was doing the Q&A at like 5 or 5:30. And I get a voice note from Emily Siddy. She's like, you might not fancy it, but any chance you want to do some commentary for our final NSL home game? And I was like, you bet I do. So I had precisely 7 minutes to prep after the Q&A. So it wasn't the most kind of well-researched gig I've ever done, but the response that I had from that was so positive and slightly overwhelming, actually. And I personally think it was that opportunity that's, I think, opened the doors for Sky and sort of, I don't know, kind of put me on the radar potentially. I don't know. I might be wrong, but yeah, I thank Emily a lot for that opportunity, and I think that's kind of a turning point for me.
I think it speaks to sort of a wider point, and maybe in Chloe and I's introductory podcast, we spoke a little bit about how Chloe wanted to get into writing about netball. Now, I think that sort of everybody will freely admit it's not a sport that is going to sustain a netball correspondent for the Times at the moment. So to me, it's super interesting to see someone like yourself who's kind of been able to do a little bit of everything and actually turn it into, like, hopefully, don't want to go into too many details, but like a career that can kind of sustain you and pay the bills. And, you know, we all talk about the big picture of what we see on the court, but off the court, like, netball needs that sort of sustainability as well. So, you know, you've obviously been submerged in it for a really long time. Like, how pleasing, I suppose, as well, like, has that been to see that there is a career now that sort of women and men and anyone who's interested can go down?
Yeah, 100%. And, you know, it is just about, like, for me personally, a sustainable career move. You know, I worked for the national governing body for England Netball for about 4 years. And then it was December 2023 that I kind of took the plunge and decided to go freelance. And I haven't lost my house yet. So I've been able to pay the mortgage. But, you know, I have to be realistic. In the off season for netball, I do have to try and pick up other sports, and I was very fortunate to get some gigs with Saracens women's rugby, and I was their pitch side reporter for the season, which was super fun and a really steep learning curve. And again, just kind of dive in headfirst into any opportunity that I can get. Like, did I know a lot about rugby? Nope. Did I learn a lot about rugby? Absolutely. And it's just putting in the hard yakkers and the graft. And, you know, for me, it's the best job in the world. Like, who wouldn't want to be pitchside or courtside watching elite women doing their thing and then being able to chat about it? I mean, there's no downside. There is a downside to it. It's quite a high pressure environment. But it's the best job in the world. Like, you can't complain. You can complain about it, but you can't complain about it, if you know what I mean.
I always say you can't complain. Like, if you cover sport for a living, like, your complaints are minimal.
Yeah.
Like, I think, like, it's all relative, and we can all have bad days at the office, but fundamentally it's like, where are you going tomorrow? Oh, I'll be at Wimbledon to cover Roger Federer's last game. Yeah, that's all right. That's not a bad gig.
Exactly. And I used to say this about the theatre as well when I worked as a performer. You know, some of the jobs that I did were just the most incredible thing I've ever done in my life. And I was like, I get to call this work? Like, this is work? Are you mad? Like, it's the best job ever. So, yeah, I feel like I'm in that space, but now in the sporting sphere, which is lovely.
Is there anything that you've learned, Lucy, from being at rugby with your pitchside role that you could apply to netball? Just out of curiosity.
Oh, gosh, that's a good question. I don't know if you meant the question this way, but I think for me, from a practical perspective of having to do that role, it's about the ability to think on your feet and the ability to read the game of what's happening. And obviously, I knew a bit about rugby because my husband plays it a lot. But having to kind of upskill myself and then being able to understand and see what's happening and being able to then ask, I suppose, a probing question to, you know, the forwards coach or the backs coach or whoever during the game. You got very limited opportunity to kind of get right to the heart of what's happening on the pitch. I think that's probably something that translates to netball, particularly when it comes to like pre and post match interviews. Like, I don't want to ask the generic questions that are very, simple to come up with. Like, sometimes I do because I panic. But, you want to really be able to dig into the heart of what's happening or what's going to happen or what has happened on the court. So, yeah, I suppose the ability to read the play and then translate that into an interrogating question in a good way.
Have you ever had any tough ones, Paul, after a loss where you've had to ask somebody something straight away?
I did actually. So it really made me laugh. It was Bristol Bears versus Saracens at Sarri's home. And I was interviewing the head coach, Dave Ward. They lost. And I said to him, where did Saracens have the upper hand? And he basically said, well, Sarries are really good at cheating. Only joking. And then carried on like giving his actual answer. But I was like, oh, that's very interesting that was your initial response, even if it was joking.
Yeah, never a joke when I say it like that.
Yeah.
Never a joke. Curious as well, and we'll get into sort of round two shortly. But Lucy, obviously, having been involved in the sport for so long and kind of in several kind of capacities, where do you think netball finds itself at this dawn of a brand new era? Right, as we keep saying this to me, netball's had several chances before and kind of dropped the ball a little bit. I don't know how many more chances the sport might get, as kind of you've alluded to there. Rugby has kind of gone on this incredible trajectory. Cricket, I would say as well, has kind of really kind of ramped up, and we're going to kind of reference, I think, basketball as a sport that's completely exploded from a female perspective. And as we'd say to everybody, there are so many people and young girls in particular who play netball these days. Surely at some point this has to be something bigger at the very top level. So I don't expect a quick answer, but where do you find netball kind of right now in its journey, if you like?
You'll rarely get a quick answer from me.
You're most welcome here. You're most welcome then.
It's such a tricky question. It's so funny. I was actually talking basically about this today with two very lovely women who have like a new sort of marketing and culture business that they launched off the ground. They really want to get involved in netball. I think for me, netball is currently a bit lost. I don't know how else to describe it. Like you say, we've had our opportunities. I don't think we've capitalised on them in the best way possible. Even with the home Netball World Cup in 2019 in Liverpool, like the impact was great, and the impact report from England Netball was impressive, but I still don't think we quite did enough with it. And I think lost is probably the best way that I can describe it. And I do think that we are under serious threat from some of the other sports, like rugby in particular, with it being a home World Cup year. I think they are about to have their moment, and with the Red Roses likely going to be in the final, if not winning. Rugby is, I would put my money on having their moment this year. And I think, you've seen football, women's football have its moment, like you say, with cricket. And I just don't know if we're fairly good at a lot of things, but I don't think we're very good or exceptional at any one particular thing. There's so many areas for growth and so many things that we don't quite get right as a sport yet. And I do kind of wonder how many opportunities are we going to get before we've kind of just missed the mark a little bit. But that's why I think the timing of NSL 2.0 was very much needed, probably a little bit late, if anything. It definitely couldn't have waited any longer, I don't think. But I'm not 100% sure if, all of the changes that have been made have had the impact that they desired. And yeah, I think we're going to go through, I think, a sticky period for the next 2 or 3 years, I think.
I think that's fair, but I think if the sport, and we spoke, Karen Gregg and Sam Bird, who we've both had on so far for extended interviews, pretty much said the same thing. It's like sticky periods and kind of things like that are okay. Like if you learn and if you grow in the right context. So yeah, it's interesting to get your take on that.
The thing with netball, though, I don't think we grow fast enough. Like the growth that we've had is inevitable. Like there's absolutely no denying it, but I think we're too slow. And I do think we need to be able to learn quicker and implement change quicker, but implement the right changes quicker as well.
And I think, Lucy, you have a lot of experience in the grassroots, and you and I have spent a lot of time there ourselves, and really understanding that picture where we talk about why these people that love the sport don't engage in it past the ball they throw around to each other. And I think the other thing that's really interesting with the Unlocked interviews, plug again, that everyone should definitely listen to, is that both Karen and Sam are very eager for everybody in the league to pull their socks up and press on with getting this right, because they know that there isn't that long, and it's important that even if it is sticky, we're still really pushing. And I don't know if we've necessarily seen that just yet. There are still these like teething problems that we've talked about, we've alluded to. So yeah, it's an interesting one, isn't it? Especially, but we all love the game. So
yeah, but there's also, I mean, I wholeheartely agree. Like, I think both Karen and Sam, I've listened to every single second you guys have produced. So yeah, absolutely loving it. And I agree with both of what they're saying. But I do think, with the clubs ultimately wanting as well to take on more responsibility for it, I think is fantastic. But I think there's so many like basic things that need to be looked at, like even social media. The disparity between quality of social media content that's coming out between clubs, I think, is quite stark in some cases. And I also think we're so unique as a sport in so many different ways, and I just want us to kind of lean into that and lean into the personalities. Like, who's the Alona Mar of netball, right? We know, because we're so involved in it, that we have got so many incredible personalities, but where's the platforms that we're profiling them on? And I just think there's a lot of low-hanging fruit, like you said in, I think, episode 1 or 2, Chloe. There's a lot of low-hanging fruit that I feel we need to attack quite strongly and very quickly in order to, in quick succession, take us to a much higher level. It doesn't have to be a slow burn. Not everything has to be a slow burn.
not everything has to take 10 years.
Yeah, there are a lot of big improvements we can make very quickly. But then again, there's all sorts of factors that come into this, like money, and all that money makes the world go round, doesn't it? So yeah, it's all well and good for me to say we should do X, Y, and Z, but actually, how are you going to pay for that to happen is the number one question that I imagine clubs have. And with all the responsibilities of having to do more arena games, all that kind of stuff, I completely understand their predicament.
Absolutely, it's a complete challenge, and look, I'm unwavering in this. I feel it's not just on England Netball and the franchises. I do think there needs to be buy-in from the media in the first instance. I think if you don't need to go back very far to not see an awful lot of Women's Super League coverage, for example, or Women's Six Nations coverage, and now you can't get enough of it. And brilliant writers are being rewarded at the SJAs last night for their content that they do. I feel like the media has a part to play. I feel like commercially as well, like there needs to be a little bit of support. If we look at the 100, which, as we've said before, is kind of a real good example because it divides people, it divides families. If I go by my house, my daughter and my wife like it. I really don't really like it that much. But there was buy-in from a significant kind of corporate sponsor to support that, despite all the criticism and all the kind of problems that everyone knew was going to come with that sport. So I do think that it's not just on England Netball and the franchises. I do think there is a kind of wider support that could help it. And as I say, there's not one answer to this, and we'll go through this a million times this season. But yeah, an interesting debate and an interesting topic of conversation. There's plenty for us to talk about, Lucy. But before all of that, we've got games to discuss as well. And Chloe, we've also got some house admin to tidy up early doors before we get into the news.
Yes, poll results.
Poll results, yes.
The Pom of Poms, as I'm calling it. I've just decided to call it that now. Yeah, we put out a poll on X, so follow us on there if you want to keep up with that, and to see of the 4 player of the matches who really stuck out to people. So we had, who do we have? Amy Carter from Manchester Thunder, Nicole Briet from London Pulse. We had Rolene Stroiker, of course, from Nottingham Forest. And then Izzy Phillips from London Mavericks. Now, it was quite interesting to watch that poll develop, as I did very closely. Nicole was quick out the gates, then it was Rolene, and then the Thunder fans got on it, and Amy Carter blew us away. So I think that's one to bear in mind as we crack on with the review.
I'm unashamedly huge Amy Carter fans. I was delighted. Yeah, I was very pleased to see that.
I think one thing we have to note early on and early doors, definitely from that top four, is 2 South Africans, Paul.
Yes, absolutely, which is a great plug for our interview coming up a little bit further down the line when we'll speak to Elmere, which I think will be fascinating on her journey and her career. Lucy, you were at a couple of games at the weekend. Anyone in particular stand out to you before we kind of get into the nuts and bolts of it?
Oh man, well I was obviously commentating the Forest game, and I just can't look past Rolene Stricker. I mean, geez Louise, she just blew me away, absolutely blew me away. But I do think there were contributing factors to why she was so incredibly good. So I do have to give praise elsewhere as well. I think some people made her look very good. I don't mean that in a mean way. Like the ball supply was a lot better this time round, which obviously helped her to shine. But yeah, she was just unbelievable.
As well as that, Chloe, we've had some great support so far. We pushed out a note to that effect. So obviously we kind of now had more than 3,000 listens just over the first few weeks, which is fairly amazing, to be honest. We've also had a DM which melted our tiny journalistic hearts, didn't we, Chloe? I love this. This is great.
Yeah, it was Shadeen van der Merwe that sort of pushed it my way actually on the Instagram. But yeah, a 14-year-old Thunder fan named Jess who told me in a really long and beautiful message how she goes to every game, every Thunder game. She's been to all the England games. She wants to go to Sydney. That's on the cards. And she was asking how she could get involved. She would love to have a media career. She would like to highlight what teenagers like her want to know about the players and the game. And she's submitted some great questions already to Elmere. So Jess, watch out. We'll be in contact, and maybe we'll have a correspondent on the ground. Who knows?
It's great. It's great to hear that sort of stuff. That, as you know, I've alluded to before. I've got a young teenage daughter myself, and to see DMs like this, where girls are now being able to see netball on a big stage and consider it maybe not necessarily as a player, but as a career, like as kind of the three of us have all been able to talk about it. It was really nice, actually. It was a really nice sort of Monday evening kind of message. Chloe sent me the screenshot, and I was like, "Oh wow, this is pretty cool now. This means something now."
Yeah, that was like Lucy and I, back in the day.
Yeah.
We were sending out messages like that, hoping someone would listen. And it's a good job someone called Paul Prendeville did.
Thank you very much. But you're only as good as the people you hire. That's the way I say these things. Any other admin before we get into the games? I know, Chloe, we got a few little bits and pieces that we're still having a few teething problems with.
Off
I think.
The court. Yeah, I see what you're getting at. Well done. Thanks for teeing me up for this one. Look, because it's become my segment, I would say. No, website stats. It looks like we now have a consistent feed in of information, but I think it's become quite clear what kind of format we're going to get it in. And quite frankly, I don't understand. I don't understand why the stats are not divided up into quarters. I don't understand why there seems to be this emphasis on shots and percentages. And so when you look at key statistics for each player, even if they're not a shooter, it will tell you that, and there'll be 2 big fat 0% amongst other things. And if you look at a player across the season, it seems to accumulate the statistics. So you don't get their full game performance, even though, so we do get the sort of nitty gritty breakdown, but it's accumulating the stats. So it's a backwards step. I maintain what I said last week, which is a bit disappointing.
I stand by that as someone who has to write, a report and things like that, trying to be able to get the information that can paint that picture. It's not good enough, frankly, at the minute. Like, it's not good enough to be able to write a report. Lucy, you might be able to kind of give us something a little bit different here, because obviously as a broadcaster, you get access to maybe a little bit more information at times. But from a prep point of view, sometimes I suppose it's a challenge for you guys.
Yeah, it is. I'll be honest. It is quite difficult, and like you say, we do get basically access to like a back end system live during games, so that we can enhance the coverage that we're doing. But it does make it hard in terms of prep for future games. You know, having to go back to find a very specific link for that one, and then it does actually, fortunately for us, break it down quarter by quarter. But I know that a wealth of work is going on in the background within England Netball to try and get it sorted. I don't think they're under any illusion that it's, you know, they know it's not good enough and they know it's not perfect. And believe me when I say they are working on it. But I think the overall consensus from, I think, everyone's opinion really is, why wasn't it sorted before the start of the season? That's kind of the big question that I think is on everyone's lips. And look, I am not tech-minded in the slightest. In fact, I repel technology on a regular basis. So I can't even begin to understand or imagine how much work goes into it and how difficult it is. But yeah, it does obviously make prep for games difficult. But actually, I think netball's documentation as an entire sport, stats aside, is actually quite poor, like across the globe.
Yeah, that's fair.
You know, I do roughly about 6 hours prep per game. I worked out the other day for a team that if I haven't covered them before, if it's a brand new team, like, you know, every team that I've covered so far, I've only done one of their games, so I do about 6 hours prep for each game. And the amount of times that you'll find conflicting information on how many caps someone has or who they debuted for or anything like that, it's been eye-opening. I didn't realise our documentation was actually as bad as it is, but as a sport as a whole, it's really quite poor.
I think it's one of the things when you cover a lot of women's sports, and not just netball, something I've noticed, like definitely in the Olympic space. It's one of the reasons why I think women's sport has been held back for so long, because actually no one thought that some of the data or whatever they were recording at the time was going to be worth anything, whereas I don't think anyone ever questioned that necessarily of men's sports. Like going, like with Paul, we've talked about it before a couple of times, but like the NBA, like it just goes back and back and back and back. The college basketball scene, like university basketball in the States, goes back and back and back. We just don't, we as a gender just haven't valued what we've done, and the archiving hasn't been there, and it's a real shame. And I actually think Lisa Alexander, in an article that she wrote for Code Netball, I believe, sort of when she was doing the top 25 best netball players, really struggled with that. She really struggled to evidence her points, and that's something that, you know, if we were to have like a GOAT debate or something like that, it does, you quickly slip into vibes, and it just doesn't feel right, and it's a disservice to those athletes that really actually did have some quite amazing numbers. So that's kind of why I think I'm so disappointed in a way this website isn't functioning right now in this quote new era, because this would have been the time to start, as Paul and I both know, like from covering lots of other sports, that kind of who's better, who did this, like we can do that with numbers, because you can argue with numbers, but we're arguing with feelings, and it's not, I don't think it's right, and it's not, especially not in 2025, to be doing that. So yeah, anyway.
This is why I say, you know, we're only going to get a finite number of chances, I think, to really propel the sport into the spotlight, and it is things like this which make it very difficult. But like I say, I appreciate the huge amount of work that goes into something like this. So I know it's not easy.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we said that, didn't we? I think we said last week that, you know, it's not easy. I've worked with enough websites to know that it's not straightforward. But I think I would also kind of make the point that, like, if you know it's coming, and we knew this was coming, and you said this, Lucy, like, we should have been kind of ready for it. We should have been, and I suppose my point on that would be last year's match centre on the day was very easy to work with. It might not have looked all glitzy and glamorous, but it was very easy to look at, to come away from like Thunder versus Lightning in the final and see who had made the most deflections, who had made the most feeds, they're fairly basic. We could get into some really advanced metrics if we wanted to, but they're kind of like some top line stuff that help you create storylines, create topics, even like as a wordsmith, to be able to just put, you know, the ever-present if you know someone's played every game of the season so far. Like, that might not seem like a lot to someone who's put in data into a machine, but to a journalist, to see that in a spreadsheet or on a kind of match center or whatever it might be, that stuff's important. And if we want media to be able to cover a sport or people to invest in the sport, they need to be able to see those types of things. But I know it's not easy. I just kind of think we
Also,
probably should have been ready.
shout out Claire Jones, who made this point really beautifully on behalf
did.
of players as well. I invite everybody, if you haven't, to listen to Claire. There's also a beautiful little crop of her talking about that on Instagram. It's a great call to action, I think, for those behind the scenes.
I totally agree with you. I think it's great. We should move it on though, because we've been chatting for nearly half an hour and we haven't even touched on the weekend's games. But before we kind of get into it, I think most of the conversation, most of the narrative has been about kind of, we haven't had these close games so far. We did get one at the weekend. We have had a fair chunk of blowouts. I think we probably got a very surprising blowout at the weekend as well. Lucy, I'm going to come to you first. Where do you stand on kind of what we've seen as a product so far and the games that we've seen?
I think what we have seen is an inevitability. I think this was always going to be the outcome of the Super Shot and introducing it, let's be honest, quite late in the day. It was always going to happen. I think we have to give these guys, both coaches and athletes, time to be able to work out what to do with the Super Shot, both attack and defence. And we know that clubs haven't had their players for long at all in pre-season, full stop, let alone before you have to start thinking about Super Shot strategy and whatnot. So for me, it's an inevitability. And we saw it with Suncorp Super Netball, the way that it was introduced again, sort of very last minute. I think it even more last minute than over here. It was like 5 weeks before the start of the season or something, wasn't it? Yeah, we saw it over there. I think I hated the Super Shot when it was brought in initially. And I'd say for the first 3 years, I was a really avid, not a fan of it in the slightest. And it's only now that clubs have had time to really understand it and work their way through it that now I'm like, I actually really enjoy it in Suncorp Super Netball. So yeah, I think it's inevitable to me.
Chloe?
Yeah, I did think that Pulse Lightning game, we'll come to it, I'm sure, but the Super Shot really killed that for me. And I noticed it also in Thunder Panthers. It wasn't the reason why Thunder won, but it really helped them turn the screw. And that's happening in the second quarter in both games. So I think that's interesting as an observation. But one thing actually I really wanted to point out, because Lucy mentioned SSN, and I had a quick look, and this really struck me, but it's the Thunderbirds and how they won the 2024 final against the Vixens. They didn't use a single Super Shot to win, and they came from behind against the Vixens. And generally their tactic that season was not to use it. They used it, they were the lowest team to use it, and the team above them, which was Fever, had used it, I believe, 71. No, they'd only used it 71 times and 69 less than the next lowest. So they really didn't need it to win. And I don't know if what that speaks to, whether it's the quality of that defence end, obviously Shamira Sterling, Latanya Wilson in that group. But I just think that's a really interesting thing to know after a few years of it being there and the success that club have had, who are now going for a three-peat. Yeah, I'm just going to throw that out there just to problematise this situation. What about you?
Yeah, look, I was kind of very much on the fence with it to start with. And to your point there, Chloe, I quite like that a team kind of maybe take a contrary kind of stance to play. I don't think sport or teams in a sport need to all play the same way. So I find that interesting just from a kind of observation and kind of engagement point of view. You know, we've spoken about, you know, kind of in the NFL, a run first team against the pass first team, or in football, you know, back in the day, Wimbledon, who would kind of smash it long and kind of get on the end of knockdown. So I don't kind of have an issue with that. I think Lucy made the very real point that the evolution of how people use it tactically is going to be where we see the real kind of value and the nuance of this. We're nowhere near understanding that after just 2 rounds of Super League action so far.
I will say, because I think it should be said, because you, Lucy, and I, we talk about this game a lot for a living, and that's one thing. And I think absolutely, let's get academic, let's get analytical with it. But one thing that really struck me at the Panthers Thunder game, where I was in the crowd, there were no media passes available, so I wasn't able to do anything there. But I was in the crowd, and by the end of the match, people were not paying attention. They had clocked out. And some of the comments that were being made by fans were like, why aren't they shooting the super shot? I would just shoot the super shot. I don't understand. And so there's, I think, a question about the context in which the super shot has been delivered and how it was, the narrative around it. This is obviously, on the topic of context, this is a new team in the BP Pulse Live Arena, the same venue of the Commonwealth Games final, the same venue of the 2024 Super League final, watching their team for the first time, getting absolutely pumped. And the super shot has helped deliver that death blow, as it were. And it's off-putting. Fans did not like it. Did not like the end result, obviously. And maybe if it had been, maybe if they'd had the Mavericks game in front of them, it might have felt different. But the way it blows out as a fan, watching that experience live is really hard. And I think we need to bear that in mind when we're talking about it in terms of blowouts. But obviously that was anecdotal. So in terms of data, it's not maybe, that's more a feel than real. But yeah, just something to mull over, I think.
Yeah, it's so interesting because also, I would classify myself as a diehard netball fan. And even watching the Pulse Lightning game, it was struggling to keep my attention a little bit. I did sort of see myself starting to get distracted by other things,
which is crazy. But
yeah. This is what I mean when I say it's an inevitability. Like, it's designed to have results like the Rhinos Mavericks game. Like, that's the ambition for it, absolutely. And I have to say that was absolutely sensational in that moment. I was actually hosting that game because I'm everywhere. Any netball, you see my face there. So yeah, I was hosting that one, and it's games like that which make my job just dreamy as a host. Like, I don't have to do anything because the netball is doing all the talking, basically. But then because it was brought in so late in the day and teams haven't really had a chance to work with it and understand it and like really innovate with it in terms of their strategy, you are going to get these blowouts. And so I think there's possibly a little bit of messaging work that I think is now sort of coming to bite us in the bum a little bit in terms of how the super shot and having less teams will help to bring score lines down a little bit. And obviously we haven't seen that so far. But this is a journey. I think it's a marathon, not a sprint. And I think we have to understand that as spectators of the game, that this is, I'd say for the first 3 years, this is probably what it's going to be like in a way. It'll get better. It absolutely will get better, I think.
Yeah, I think I'm with you. Chloe, I can already see her face.
We just literally spent the first 10, 20 minutes of the show talking about how it had to happen quickly, how to buy people in. So anyway, but I think, Lucy, your point about narrative is spot on, because, and then I think, me explaining that context is needed, like to the average fan that's coming along. Maybe this is their, like as Karen Gregg says, it's your one game that you come to the season with your family, and it was that, and it's like, oh, painful. Anyway, we'll see.
Well, that is as good a reason as any to move on. Chloe, you gonna spin us through the results from?
Yeah, let's go.
Round 2?
Finally, let's go. So first game of they happened at the same time, but Friday, Panthers lost 47-77 to Manchester Thunder. Forest defeated Dragons 70-54. Pulse defeated Lightning 77-51. And Mavericks pipped Rhinos 54-53.
I think, and I said this to you, I think as good a way as any to go through this is to have one game each, and then we'll all chat about Pulse Lightning, because I think we would probably all agree going into the weekend it was the most interesting game, and for many reasons probably came out that way. So, Chloe, you were at Birmingham, weren't you? So do you want to kick us off with some Panthers Thunder hot takes?
Some hot takes. Oh, yes. Okay. So some fairly important stakes in this game, with both teams having lost the first round. So both teams looking for a win. Both teams also were missing some personnel. As we know, Thunder, that is the case of Nicholas Smith, Nat Metcalf, Lois Pearson and Paige Reed. While Panthers remained without Gabby Sinclair, we still haven't seen her. And this time also Gabby Marshall was out, their captain and centre. So not the 2-10s we were hoping for, anyway. The 47-77 final score meant that Panthers suffered the biggest defeat of the round and actually the biggest defeat of the season so far. For Thunder, I was super impressed with the quality turnaround between games 1 and 2, given also that they only had 5 days of between the two, which I think is quite interesting to note. They were clinical, did the basics well, tactically very spot on, I think, in my opinion at least. Panthers, on the other hand, I think we'll call it forgettable performance, evidenced not only by the scoreline, but the stat that, at least on the website, sticks out to me is 20 unforced errors to Thunder's 5. To me, that's quite unacceptable at this level in the professional era. I think some players on court will probably be a bit disappointed with that. And I think the thing about a 10 is there's nowhere to hide. So for the second game in a row, Joe Tripp pulled off Ziggy Berger. And to me, that's really exposing Panthers when you look at when she comes off and then what happens. I think that's quite telling. We know she's the big scoring threat, has been for the team, that the kind of the nexus of this team that was borrowed from sort of 7 Stars, well, borrowed, brought through from 7 Stars, now defunct. But the league knows that. And rather than keep her on, at least as a semblance of a threat, Tripp has decided to pull her off. And in my mind, that kind of plays into the hands of the opponents because that'll be exactly what they are hoping for. So that's kind of the top lines. We talked in the preview also about how Berger and Huckle was going to be a key matchup, and stopping or stemming stopping the ball coming into Berger was going to be key. Karen Gregg, another plug, I urge you to listen to it, talk to us about tactics and technical mastery. And I think she delivered that. And she showed, I think, with what Thunder put out, that their focus in training had been Ziggy Berger. So for everybody listening, I'm going to do a Tamsin Greenway, and I'm going to kind of actually show you what Karen was doing. Yeah, which we're going to try it out. If you're listening on Spotify, you can sort of switch to the video. If you're only listening to it, then we have YouTube. So please, if you like what you're hearing, go and watch it back. If not, I'll try and explain it as best I can. So listen in carefully. So for Thunder, tactically, it starts with a centre pass. You effectively have a wall that is formed as soon as Ruth Hughes goes to let go of the ball. Thunder players, in this case, it's Carter, McKevitt, and McCormick, are going to jump over the line and form a wall. And it stops the first drives from the wing attack and goal attack, which in this case is Betsy Creek and Jess Shaw. If you see there, look at that line that they form, 1, 2, 3. Now, this centre pass is really interesting because it's quite early on in the game, and you can see Hughes still hasn't let the ball go. And actually, in this instance, she has to look back. And as you can see, the players around her are being slightly monstered by Thunder players, but she does get the ball off. But it's on the 3rd second. That pressure is really important because it's going to happen pretty much every single centre. Right, here's another one that I want to draw attention to, this centre pass defence. Again, we're slightly further on into quarter 1. Look at that wall. We see Carter and McKevitt jumping over the line, blocking out Jess Shaw. Hughes doesn't have much choice, so she sends the ball out to Betsy Creek, who receives it by the transverse line and by the sideline. Now, in this bit, she's caught the ball and she's already looking down to attacking third. She's a goal attack, that makes sense. But look at where the Thunder wall is now. They're tracking backwards. McKevitt is picking up Hughes because Carter is going down to the space where she thinks that Creek is looking, which is towards the circle. And McCormick's not even going to bother marking the pass. She's going to come for Jess Shaw's drive into the pocket. Now look at this. A second later, you have Elmere van der Berg and you have Emma Rayner, who are on their players coming up because they can see Betsy Creek has no one to pass to. McKevitt all over Hughes. Carter, as I said, marking the space. McCormick has Shaw covered. And look at that. You can even see Josie Huckle out running because she thinks that the fly might even be on, which is amazing. Love that for a goalkeeper. But 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 Thunder players all in front of their players. And guess what happens? It's a held ball. Thunder turnover. Brilliant. Exactly what Karen Gregg would have wanted. But this is really important. This first phase centre pass defence is really important because it's going to put lots of pressure on the second phase. Now, we know, we've talked about it, that Panthers have one big scoring threat, Ziggy Berger. And she's going to be in that circle waiting for the ball. Now, your Thunder, you know that that's going to come in, and it's going to come in quickly when it's on. So I want to draw attention to this centre pass here. Now, right before this happens, it's amazing. You can see it in broadcast. Betsy Creek actually points to Hughes and points it that way, as if she wants it to go to Gabby Coffey, because she wants to try and get down and get the drive. She wants the second phase ball as deep as possible. So Hughes does that. She lets the ball go to Gabby Coffey. But look again, 1, 2, 3 Thunder players, near enough in a line, in that wall space. But McKevitt is all over Jess Shaw because she knows that's the primary feeder into Berger. So what happens? Well, Creek doesn't have much choice. She has to be the option. So she loses all that time she spent going down to come up and get the second phase centre pass. But look where she is. Look where Coffey was, and look where Creek is. She's barely made any ground. That is the second phase centre pass. There's no depth. But it's super short period. We're in quarter one. Creek has one thing on her mind. Can I get the ball into Berger? Thunder know this, right? They've thought about this. Look where Shaw and Hughes are. They're being blocked out. They're being forced out. And McCormick is the key, because she isn't going to mark the pass. She's going to go to where the ball is going to go, which is exactly to the top of the circle. Now, Josie Huckle, for her part, is doing her role really well. She's pushing Berger exactly to where McCormick's going to be, which is the top of the circle. And McCormick, it's a simple backing up. We know Thunder players do that really, really well. And up she goes for the deflection. Perfect. Now, Thunder don't win this ball because McCormick can't land it into an intercept. But we're going to see it again. And we see this, I think I counted 3 or 4 times. We saw this play where the pressure was really, really on in the second phase. And actually it's a trap, because it looks like the ball to Berger is on, but you don't see McCormick tracking back. So here we are again. Now this one is really cool because it's in quarter 3. So Thunder haven't stopped. And it is actually, you see Clara Miles, so a different goal attack. The tactic stays the same because the tactic is really successful. And also I want to point out, in quarter 2, Thunder they had won the first quarter by 1, and by quarter 2 they had won it by 15. But they don't stop. They do the same thing again really well. Clara Miles, you'll notice she's probably about 1 metre to the left of where Creek received the second phase centre pass. So really high in that sort of transverse area. Look where McCormick is. She's tracking back because she knows where this ball is going. We're saying this again. She's going to go to the top of the circle, and Huckle is pushing Berger, pincering her in. And look at this. Both McCormick and Huckle get to the ball. It's almost like an Eiffel Tower of Thunder nightmare. And they pick up this ball. They both deflect it. Taylor McKevitt picks it up, and off it goes. It's a Thunder turnover. Now, to me, this second phase defence was really, really important, and it served Thunder so well, because apart from that quarter 2 scoreline, the other thing that I really wanted to draw out is not only did they advance the league in the lead in that game, in the super shot period, when I was in the arena, I noticed it, and I noticed it when I was watching back. It takes them 3 minutes of the 5 minutes to even get a goal, and it's 10-2 to Thunder in that 5-minute period. So when I was talking earlier about killing the game, it killed the game. And actually, in this game, Panthers never got more than a run of 3, and Thunder, their best run was 7. In a game of alternating centres, that is pretty tough. So I think we can chalk this one up to good tactics and great execution from Manchester Thunder.
Lucy, what are you and I supposed to do after that now? Yeah. I'm just going to log off and go to bed now. Yes. That's superb.
Oh, that's superb. That's absolutely fantastic.
Does that make sense? Everyone understand what I was trying to say?
Absolutely. I'll go to the professional commentator to pass judgment officially, but to my eye, that was fantastic.
Yeah, absolutely. And I actually think, just to sort of sidetrack a little bit, this kind of content is what the netball world has been screaming out for so long. So thank you on behalf of the netball family and the fans, which I am first and foremost, for kind of producing this type of content. But I think you're absolutely bang on. Like, not only were Thunder, I think, strategically, like tactically supreme, I think the pressure that they put on every single person, I think, won their position across the court. All 7 players for Thunder won their position. And the pressure ultimately just forced some really dreadful decision making, I think, from Panthers. Like that particular passage, the second one that you just showed then, I remember watching that when I finally got to watch it back. And I just said to myself, like, why on earth did that ball ever go? Because for me, that one was actually pretty signposted as to what was about to happen, and the ball still went. So it's that pressure that then affects the decision making. And yeah, it was, Thunder at their very best, wasn't it?
Unrelenting, and you're right. And
Yeah.
the pressure. It starts with the first phase. It then carries through to the second phase. And I think the thing to note is this sort of setup doesn't work all the time. It won't, like, you just can't always affect. It won't be every single centre pass won't always work out that way. But it was, for me, the way that Thunder continued to do that, even like past the first half when the game was pretty much in the bag, that I think speaks to the tenacity of the players, and a real headache for Tripp, I think, in terms of where this team goes forward. Like, I think we spoke about, even in the preview, not just to the round, but to the season, like, we know this is the way that Panthers want to play. And I said before this started, Berger coming off doesn't really help Panthers. So what they're going to do, I think it's the work out the front just needs to be sharper. We know they're without Sinclair and Marshall, but I think Thunder's tactics still would have been the same. So, and the other thing I think Kerry Armand noted, and maybe a good one to sort of flag when we're talking about Super Shot, is both teams actually netted 6 each. So even if you take the Super Shot out, would have been a 30-goal win regardless.
I also think some of the decision making from a coaching perspective for Panthers I found very intriguing. I'm just sort of trying to bring up the stats so I can have a look and actually put some numbers to what I'm about to say. But I think it was quite a weak game from both Jess Shaw and, in particular, Ruth Hughes. And I think I made note of it. Phoebe Maslin went into centre, in quarter 3, and I think that decision to put her in there came far too late. I think Ruth Hughes had a number of misfeeds or unforced errors for my liking, which I'm just trying to back up now if I can find it. Here we go. Let's have a look. So, I mean, it says she's only got 2 unforced errors. Betsy Creek had 4. Clara Mars had 3. So, like, that attacking end, Jess Shaw had 2. Like, there's a number of unforced errors there. And I think the decision, when you've got someone who's like real quality, like Phoebe Maslin, that's a great player to pull up. I would have put her into centre far sooner. But yeah, I think there were some curious coaching decisions. Like you say, taking Siggy Berger off, I think absolutely played into Thunder's hands.
I think it also speaks to the point, and Sam Bird spoke about this really well last week, which was about the sort of the strength of squads, like, and do we have 8 rosters full of quality? And that is of no detriment to the players involved, but it's like, can you look down your bench and be able to change a game significantly, if that makes sense?
It's 8 rosters of 10. That's the problem as well. Like, I totally understand, like, cutting the number is supposed to increase the quality, but then when you have 2 players out like Panthers did, and 2 big players, like we haven't seen the Gabby triumvirate yet, like, that's huge. So I'm not to excuse that, because like I said, I think the tactically they were going to come up against that Thunder pressure no matter what, and I think, like I said, the turnaround, like losing to Lightning in your home arena probably did not please Karen Gregg, even though she knows what she's dealing with, which is 4 of her 10 out. But yeah, that 10 piece is tough. And that's why I said earlier, you've got nowhere to hide.
Yeah.
You have to make it work.
Lucy, you were at Forest Dragons. How was the motor point?
Yeah, you know what? I take my hat off to Forest. I think they did an excellent job. Everything looked really good. It was slick. Obviously, they didn't have the entire arena open. There were sections that were obviously curtained off. But I think, I mentioned this on commentary, the fact that they had Panthers playing their home game an hour down the road at exactly the same time when they're essentially competing for the same or very similar audiences within a quite a condensed area. I thought they did a cracking job. Like 2,500, it looked really good. And the vibes are on point. Again, I said it on commentary, my Shazam was going into overtime. Like the DJ was just banger after banger after banger. It was wicked.
Always important. What about on the court? Anything?
Oh yeah, the most important stuff, actually, the actual game. Yeah, look, it was a really interesting one. I think for Dragons, it was a lot of the same problems from their round one game. And again, I said this to Pam on commentary, is it one too many changes in the shooting circle? For me, the answer is yes. I went through the broadcast group chat afterwards to look at how many changes there were. And there were 9 team sheets submitted, or like change sheets submitted, that were concerning the shooting circle. But sometimes there was 2 changes at once. So there was a minimum of 9 changes in the shooting circle throughout the game. The first one being Chelsea Beer coming on with about 3.5 minutes left of the quarter, which I find intriguing. And I think there's a myriad of problems that is going to come from so many changes, players not having time to find their flow, potentially not knowing which player to have on at which time. Completely understand wanting to have Georgia Rowe on in the 1-point shot because she's an immensely accurate shooter. But her unwillingness to put up a 2-point shot means that when she is on the court in that time, your defensive strategy is clear as day. Like you're gonna isolate her and double mark either Chelsea or Philippa, and then when they've got Chelsea and Philippa on at the same time, it makes life a little bit easier for Dragons. But the pressure was really on to have to sink the super shots, and it's, Pam alluded to it, it's that change of mentality of having to sink them when you need them versus when you want them, and that was really evident for me. I just think there were personally too many changes for Dragons, but that's not to take away from Forest. Like I thought Forest, it was a really big step up from their round one performance. I think Brie Grierson in particular really was far better than what she was in round one. It was a great performance from her. I do think the attacking end still has some woes. Rhea Dixon in that goal attack position, you have to be a threat at the post. You just have to be a threat at the post, because we saw in round one what happens when you're not, is that Rolling Strucker then gets absolutely monstered by a 2-on-1 defence. But I do have some sympathy for Rhea, because you think of who she's played with for the last how many seasons, yeeting a ball into a Mary Chollock, which in itself is skillful, not to take that away from her, or playing with Jamaica with a very tall holding shooter. I do think that's changed her goal attack game. So I think coming to Forest is, I think, an excellent move for her, because I do think that Chelsea and Shona are going to help her to become a true goal attack, sort of a little bit with a pinch of salt. So I think by the end of the season, I'm hoping she'll have gone on this real big journey, like a growth journey, and she'll be more of a true goal attack. But yeah, the accuracy is a real problem. I think she ended on about 56% or something, inclusive of the super shot. She ended round one on 40%. So, that's just not where the numbers need to be. I thought defensively, Pekara and Pavlin had a really good game. I think they were complemented beautifully by Leighton and Cooper out the front. I do think Cooper has a bit of a way to go from an attacking perspective in that centre bib. I think she's a real standout in wing defence. So in that centre bib, sometimes just the vision or the touch on the feed is a little bit wanting. Whereas obviously Iona Christian is far more of an attacking centre. So I can understand the rationale of wanting to really put a defence heavy line out up to turn over loads of ball and then be able to get that to goal, and then bringing an attacking centre on to then really push forward. I can see that. But yeah, I don't know. I think some of the touch on the feeds just needs a little bit of work. Rolling Strucker, just sublime. Absolutely sublime. I was losing my damn mind. I'm in commentary. And it's like, it's watching players like her that makes me love the super shot, like the smiling assassin, just like reining them in for fun. And, it was great. But yeah, I think super shot strategy for Dragons is a real weak point at the moment. It was a tough day in the office for Dragons defence because Rowling was so good and because the ball supply was significantly better to her. But I do think as well a question needs to be asked about the size of the super shot zone, because I do think it's looking pretty easy for particularly for the South Africans in the league, who are just dominating at the moment. I do wonder if we should take an A and Z approach and make it a bit smaller.
I think that's fair. I think it's something that was kind of addressed fairly early on in the sort of super shot debate. I will always make the point that if you ask players, and certainly players, professional players, to get good at something, they are going to get good at it. That's a good thing, to be able to see a player and an athlete be able to pull that off. But as we've seen, it does create these storylines that are not going to go away all season. And anyone who wants to kind of bury their head in the sand about this, like it's not going to happen. This is going to be a key part of the season, and it's how you learn from it that we'll keep saying is really important. And I think we raised that, didn't we, Chloe, in the season preview? It's just like it's a fairly obvious tactical setup in attack, and that was evident at the Super Cup from the Dragons. And it does become quite predictable to be able to kind of play against. So it'll be interesting to see how they evolve that, I think.
I think we have to just remind everybody that they recruited without knowing the super shot was there.
That's absolutely true.
Yeah. Be very, very interesting to know if George Rowe is being told not to take a 2-point shot, because I think there is a difference, and we need to look at our tool holding shooters and ask whether they are being told not to take them because they need to be there for the rebound, or they just don't want to take them. I think that's something Berger as well. People behind me in the crowd were like, why isn't she taking them? Something we need to maybe eventually get round to asking the coaches, because I think that does put that pressure on the goal attack. And as Lucy's pointed out really eloquently there, that's just make it really predictable if she's not going to. So I can understand why you'd want her there, but is it in your best interest overall?
Interesting. Well, Mavs Rhinos was a game that I paid particularly close attention to. A really, really good game. Lucy touched on it at the top. There was next to nothing in it throughout, if we're honest. Like there was, I think at one point, sort of Rhino started fast, got out to sort of a 5 or 6 goal lead. Mavs came kind of storming back into it, still trailed by half time, and were kind of sort of still far enough away for you to think the Rhinos just about had control of it. To that end, I continue to be hugely impressed by Cassie Howard. I think she's been a real asset for Rhinos. I think she's someone who's going to continue to grow and develop, and playing in that sort of what in theory should become a really experienced defensive end. It'll be interesting to see how they evolve. And obviously with Lauren Palmer coming out of the sort of Thunder School, if you like the coaching tree that belongs to Karen Gregg, that sort of defensive approach first is going to be something that I'm quite keen to see how it evolves for Rhinos. But as I said, there kind of wasn't really much in the game. There are a few little kind of tactical tweaks. I thought Mavs kind of switching up. First of all, it took sort of, I think it was Emily Andrew came out of the game as Kira Rothwell came in. And then they took Emma Thacker off and brought Emily Andrew back on, which I think, to the point we've just made about Cardiff being quite predictable, I think that gave Leeds just sort of different problems at different times to think about. And again, we will talk about the nuance of attack, but I think that made a difference for Mavs. And because they were able to change it, maybe Rhinos weren't able to just stay in a consistent defensive structure towards the end, which ultimately led to the perfect kind of NSL 2.0 dramatic finish where Kira Rothwell sinks a brilliant super shot to win the game. So I think as far as Mavs are concerned, Izzy Phillips was strong again. She's going to prove to be a really astute pickup, I think. We're seeing her maybe more consistently at wing defence this year. She sort of played a fair bit at pulse at centre last year. I do think she is going to really kind of enhance her England claims in that wing defence bib as we go on. Raz Kwasi again has started the season on fire. She was excellent. Another player that I think she got a player of the match award. Am I right in saying that? No, it was Izzy. Sorry, it was round one that Raz got player of the match. Might be confusing my sponsors and broadcast awards here at times. So, but yeah, I think Lucy, I'm keen to hear what you think, because whilst I thought the game was just super close, so there were elements of it where I felt Mavs were getting the upper hand, and I think they probably just had a little bit more of an attacking change-up that got them over the line. We all know how good Joyce Mvula is. She was brilliant in round one, strong in round two again. I just felt the change-up that Mavs were able to do when chasing a result, as we've kind of discussed, just in this instance kind of worked to their advantage.
Yeah, 100%. Like, look, it was epic is the only way I can describe it in the arena at the time. You know, Mavs, I think, really tried to enhance the game day experience as well. They had these like super shot cards, and you know, every time a super shot was scored, the crowd were on their feet with these cards up in the air. Like, it was really, really cool. And I think, to your point, Paul, with Kira Rothwell in particular, I take my hat off to her, because she's gone from, you know, a starting seven position for a couple of seasons now, to 2025, where now she's being used as an impact player. So she's getting less court time than what she's used to. But my God, is she making the most of it? And I think to have such I suppose, a growth mindset from her perspective, to be like, yeah, it's probably not ideal that I'm getting less court time, but the court time that I am going to get, I'm going to take full advantage of. And I think she's absolutely doing that. And I think it's a bit of a deadly weapon, really, being able to use her as an impact player, because it's proved fruitful twice now, I think, so far. So yeah, take my hat off to her. Like, ice cold, like ice running through her veins in that last second. My God, it was just unbelievable. And yeah, I messaged her about it afterwards, and I was just like, "Oof, ice queen, ice queen." It was phenomenal, absolutely phenomenal. But I think as well, the other thing we have to mention, obviously, Chelsea Blackman going down during the third or fourth quarter. I can't remember now. The mental strength and the mental fortitude and resilience that Mavericks as a team have shown the last two rounds, you know, obviously losing Vicky and now losing Chelsea, to not let that completely derail them, which we have seen happen to some teams. And I'm thinking, you know, Loughborough Lightning Grand Final 2022, when Ella Clark went down, they just completely capitulated, which you absolutely can understand how and why that happens. But they haven't allowed that to happen to them. And I think that's really intriguing, and a sign of good things to come, I hope. But yeah, I thought Keris Finn as well. I have to applaud her, the impact that I think she had in those few minutes that she got. She turned over, I think, two crucial balls in that last quarter, that were then, fortunately for them, rewarded down the other end. I thought I'd love to see more of her with Quashie, in goalkeeper, goal defence, goalkeeper, respectively. I thought it was wicked. I love Keris Finn.
I think it speaks to a good, you know, Mavericks have kind of, you know, we're finding out a little bit more about them, and both Chloe and I are going to be at Mavericks Pulse on Friday.
So am I. I'm on comms. Dream team in the house.
Chloe, you're working, right? Sorry, no, Chloe, you're not working. Lucy, you're working. I'm working. Chloe, you're drinking, aren't you?
I'm growing the game, Paul. No, I joke, but putting that aside, I'm taking some friends of mine from school that were not netball players at school, and we all live in London, so I'm
doing God's work, Chloe.
Well, that's what I mean. I'm growing the game. I'm taking them to their local, and they're going to watch some very good netball, hopefully.
I think it will be a good game, and having spoken sort of behind the scenes to people at Mavs, I think there's been a real effort to bring in sort of an element of that young core that they feel can grow together over the next sort of few years. I genuinely don't think they see this as a sort of one and done. That squad, and obviously Izzy Phillips speaks to that, Ellie Ratu, like it does feel like a squad that's been kind of pulled together to grow together. And to your point, Lucy, to see them being able to pull kind of results out and kind of rally round each other is something that maybe, if we want to be hypercritical here, we haven't always associated with a Mavs team in the past. Like, they've always had strong rosters that we think should be competing for top four, and maybe have kind of fallen a little bit short. But I think there's some really good early signs from the way they've been able to grind out results, especially in trying circumstances. And we know that Thunder have obviously had to kind of go about it. It looks like Mavs are finding out the hard way now as well. We wait to find out about Chelsea Blackman. Vicky Oyasola looks like a pretty nasty knee injury. I don't think full confirmation has come yet, but I think we'd be staggered if it was anything other than sort of an ACL or something like that, because it didn't look good. It looks horrible. I've seen enough of them sort of covering football down the years. So obviously we wish Vicky and we wish Chelsea all the best, and we'll kind of keep across the injuries there. And then I suppose the last game from the round was the game we all thought might be a 54-53 kind of finish, but in the end it very much wasn't. Pulse took out what was a hugely impressive 77-51 victory. Chloe, you feel that the super shot was the defining factor here?
I think so. I think if you look at the way the second quarter kind of developed, I think Lightning, I don't think so. The super shot is like a physical thing, right? But we're talking about and Lucy kind of called on Pam, which I think Pam's wisdom bears mentioning, but it was the psychological reaction from Lightning when the super shots from Pulse were just going in and in and in. And I think they kind of panicked. And I think looking at the stats, at least on the website, there wasn't that much between the two teams, which to me would have pointed out to a game that might have been, look, I'm in hypothetical here because the result is the result, but it might have been a lot closer had the super shot not been in play. But I think the impact that it had in the second quarter, we already saw in the first quarter that Liv Sheen and Nicole Britt weren't hit messing with their accuracy on it. But that was my feel for the game. And it was really interesting, I think, to see Samantha Wallace-Joseph finally step onto the court. But Kerry Almond, again, I point to her and her wisdom on social media, but pointed to the pain that Wallace-Joseph looked like she was in. And I certainly felt that on my broadcast as well when I was watching it. But I think another really comprehensive performance from London Pulse. We spoke to Sam Bird, obviously, for Unlocked plug again, shock. But I was really impressed by the way that they handled themselves, the pressure. Lightning Pulse has become a big fixture. Definitely. I think it was spicy, but I mean, really kind of disappointing. Sort of. I think, Paul, you said it to me. It's the best and the worst of the super shot.
Yeah. It did feel like, the reason I think it felt like that was, I think Pulse kind of nailed it and were obviously very accurate on the day. I think we probably all would have maybe thought that Lightning would have been a little bit more accurate. Ella Clark is obviously such a huge asset to them in that capacity, given her background. Sammy Wallace-Joseph clearly wasn't fully fit. She's obviously being managed back to game time. And Berry Neal, I think, struggled a little bit with the sort of defensive, against the sort of Pulse defensive pressure that has become their identity. And obviously Hallie and Fumi will have trained against her week in, week out for the last couple of years. I think they were able to kind of shut her down. And when Berry came out of the game, I think it then left sort of Lightning with one super shot option, I think, and Pulse were able to sort of shut that down quite easily, or at least make it difficult and difficult enough to miss shots. So I think from that point of view, Lightning were then forced to chase it, and when they missed, Pulse were then able to sort of maximise what they wanted to do and kind of almost decide. Like at one point, I think I saw Liv kind of get herself into the super shot zone because she was where she felt comfortable. Another time, I think I saw her just kind of slot in under the post and take the one when the easy option might have been to just, get the two. So it looked to me like just Pulse were a team who were very much in control, and I feel like Lightning are probably still finding their way. We've made the point that they are quite a changed team this year.
I wonder, sorry, because I would chuck it to Lucy, but given the performance that we saw from Lightning, does that change the way you saw their performance against Thunder at all? In the sense of Thunder were obviously first game with the very, very raw front end with Lucy Herdman and India Massa, and Lightning sort of dominated that, and then they were like flipped on by London Pulse. I'm just wondering if like we had a weakness of opposition scenario in game one, and then by game two they got found out in a big way. And also, while I'm here, props to Zara Everett for another dominant performance at wing defence. Absolutely monstered Hannah Joseph, like such a key part. Maybe I will do as Tamsin Greenway on Zara Everett if she gives me the means this coming week. But yeah, back to that. I just wondered off the back of that, just to chuck that out there. But I don't know. I'll throw it to Lucy anyway.
Oh god, that's a tough one. I mean, I don't think you can. I do think they performed better still in the Thunder game, but you can't deny that Thunder's lineup, the inexperience that they had and the lack of time and connections together, obviously played a part. Of course, it's going to play a part. I think for me, obviously the damage was done in the second quarter. It was a 10-19 quarter to London Pulse, but they actually won the fourth quarter 8-23. So like that's really where they just put their foot down. They're like, we ain't messing about. We care about our goal difference, like all that kind of stuff. And by the end of it, it kind of, without wanting to sound mean to Lightning, it kind of just looked like a bit of a training session for London Pulse. It was a bit painful to watch at times, let's be honest. It was great to see the injection of Sammy Wallace. I do think she looked in an incredible amount of pain, and I do wonder actually what her season is going to look like and how viable it is that she's going to be able to play and play lots. So yeah, I do think potentially like a player welfare duty of care sort of thing needs to happen there and review realistically what her chances are of being able to play significant minutes. Of course, pure speculation. I don't know anything about the situation. I could be completely misreading how she felt. She might have felt fine and dandy, but it looked like she was hobbling off court. So yeah, it was an interesting one. Let me open my note. I did make some notes on it. I thought defensively, Hallie, Fumi, Zara did a great job at keeping the Loughborough Lightning feeders off of circle edge, where they've been so used to being able to feed off of circle edge into Elmere, and it didn't matter as much all the time. Now it's obviously a very different circle, and they need to be on circle edge. So I thought Pulse did an excellent job at keeping them off. For me, attacking wise for Lightning, Berry needs to get stuck in a lot earlier. There's no use of her sort of hovering around on the fringes of the circle, because she's not going to do any damage there, or even worse, outside the circle. She's not going to do any damage there at all. The only way she can be truly a threat is to get in that circle and to be a strong option to ball. And the sooner she does that, then I think the sooner their attacking end will click a bit more, and it will open up Ella Clark. But yeah, it was an interesting one.
I think to that point as well, that's where Nicole Breed deserves an awful lot of credit. She was brilliant in the first game. She was outstanding again. She obviously moved around the court a little bit last year, partly due to necessity for Pulse, but she seems to have absolutely relished the fact that she is the starting goal attack, and that relationship with Liv Sheen. I think, Sam told us that unlocking the kind of attack end is something that they were really keen to do. And to your point there, Lucy, whilst I do think Zara deserved an immense amount of credit, I actually thought Tyler Orr did a lot of off-the-ball work that was really impressive defensively. I was kind of watching the game with my wife, and I made the same point that you made, that keeping Lightning off that edge, I think, was like twofold. Tyler and Zara did that brilliantly. And I think that sort of speaks to the way sort of Alicia Scholes and Nicole Brie and Olivia Sheen have been able to just really kind of gel straight away as an attacking unit. And the interesting thing to note there, when we've spoken about squad sizes, is Pulse chose only to bring on sort of young Gracie Smith for a bit more exposure. And I think they genuinely felt they wanted to make a point with the performance and the result, and they definitely did that.
Another thing, a final thing I'll just chuck in, is the average age of the starting centre court, I think is another interesting thing, because Lightning have obviously really stuck with that core, that middle group, even despite the changes to the shooting, and they've stuck with that group. But Nat Panagary's 34, Beth Cobden 31, Hannah Joseph 31, so about an average of 32, and Tyler Orr is 24, Liz Scholes 23, and Everett 25. So average age of about 24. And I think we saw that by the end, because they're so sluggish getting in to the circle because of that work that you guys have very beautifully spoken about, keeping them off the circle edge. But really interesting to just, two squads very different.
Right, well, that finally is round 2 in the books. We'll get into round 3 shortly. But before that, Chloe and I sat down for our latest Unlocked interview, our deep dives with players, coaches and officials. And here's a little taste of our chat with South African Spa Protea Elmere van der Berg.
This latest instalment, we are so delighted to have our first player, Elmere van der Berg of Manchester Thunder and the Spa Proteas. Elmere, welcome.
Thank you for having me. It's such an honor to be the first player on the podcast.
No, we're so delighted to have you, aren't we, Paul?
Yeah, we did. We needed someone who's taken the league by storm. We wanted someone who's made an impact, and you've done just that. So, as Chloe says, we're delighted to have you. We'll chat a little bit about your kind of journey to the Super League, but kind of first up, how's your season so far? How's it gone for you? You happy?
Since arriving here in Manchester after our Nations Cup, it just felt straight like I was at home. I think for me it was more because this is my second season being here at Manchester Thunder. So I knew all of the girls and all of that. So yeah, I really enjoy Thunder this year because my best friend from South Africa is also living with me. And we're playing for the same team. So yeah, this year actually feels like the time is going by very quickly. Where last year it felt like doesn't want to go. But yeah, it's such a nice environment to be in and to just enjoy and love netball again.
Tell us a little bit about being with Nicola Smith. I assume that's your best friend that you're talking about there. You guys live together. Who's in charge in the house?
So she's passenger princess. So I'm the one that drives us around the whole time. And yeah, we'll make turns to cook dinners in the evenings. But yeah, it's just so fun to have her around and to be with her and to have this whole experience with her. She's such a fun girl to be around and she loves a joke. So I will literally, when we get back from training, walk into a room and then she'll be dancing all by herself. Or yeah, she makes everything quite interesting. And yeah, we can have a great laugh together as well.
I think sometimes in sport, Elmere, we can kind of forget that for a lot of athletes, they maybe move country and move to a different place. So how good has it been this year? I know you had Shadeen last year, but to have sort of someone who kind of knows you and knows your kind of your culture, your heritage, your backgrounds, all those sorts of things. How important is that to kind of have maybe a little piece of home in Manchester?
I think when you go away from home for such a long time, it's quite important to have that one friend with you just to speak Afrikaans to, or just to remind you a little bit of home. Because since we moved here, we've been having a barbecue every weekend, and that's a thing that our South Africans are used to do every single almost week. So yeah, we've been having traditional South African food, and last year me and Shadeen didn't live together, so it was difficult to prepare a meal that's South African for just me. And yeah, just to speak Afrikaans and having Nicola here, we go to church every Sunday. So it almost feels like you're not actually in another country because we are so close and we know each other so well. We've been together for 3 months now since the Protea team and all of that. So every time when she thinks something, I would say it, or when I think something, she would say it. So we're in sync so well now. We just think the same things as well. But yeah, I think it's important for the mental aspect of being away from home for that long to also have somebody that reminds you of home, because there is video call and all of that to call your family, but they're not close to you for 6 months.
And I suppose you've probably also been a bit of a lift for Nicola being injured and not being able to start the season, and of course like not really get too much into your international period as well, because it wasn't that long into it that she broke her wrist. Tell us a little bit about how you've dealt with injury at Thunder, because it's been, we spoke to Karen and she talked about how amazing you guys have been sort of dealing with the challenge. It's not the best start to the season, I suppose, but what's the group been like, kind of dealing with that?
So when Nicola came in with her wrist, they immediately put her on fitness. So while we were busy training, she would be running up and down the court. And then while we have a break and she's still running, the team would motivate her, because it's not nice to be training on your own where everyone else is literally next to you training together and having fun and making jokes and all of that. So we would motivate her while we have a water break. And with Lois and Paige, I haven't seen Lois that much yet, but yeah, I actually saw her last night and she looks good. I'm positive. And then Paige is also there cheering on from the sideline. You will also always hear her and her loud voice. And yeah, Nat with her pregnancy has been at every training so far, so she will help us attackers to do the finer detail and finishing off strongly. So yeah, even though with all the injuries, all of the players have been there to support us while they're on the sideline. And I know it's not nice for them to sit there, but just to have them in the environment the whole time is also nice, because then it feels like our little family is together again. But yeah, we've been actually very positive regarding all the injuries that we have gotten this season so far.
You're in your second season now with Thunder. How impressed have you been with that sort of culture and identity that they've created? It seems to just make it so much easier for maybe the girls who weren't expected to step up, and I think sort of we kind of class like maybe some of the pathway athletes prospering as like a real success story. How impressed have you been with that side of things?
When I arrived here last year, so I was in university for 4 years, and because of everyone being a different age at university and everyone being on a different level of stage in their life, everyone is not that disciplined and committed to achieve something. And when I arrived here in Manchester last year, you just know when you step out on court what needs to be done and what you need to get done. And I feel like that's a very important aspect, because if you don't have that, nobody need to tell you that. You just know you need to do it. And I think with that, there comes a lot of discipline as well, because now you know you need to train, you need to gym, you need to do extra fitness and all of that. And just the little family that we have, everyone gets along so well. We can joke, we can laugh with each other. And I feel like that's also an important aspect of playing netball, because you need to be able to have fun on court as well, and it not to be just serious and everyone gets angry at each other because something is not working. And one thing that always stands out to me for Thunder is the fact that we never give up. Even though we struggle with something in training, we will figure it out till we get it right. So yeah, and no one's head just drops, and no one's negative if that happens. So yeah, that's one thing I really enjoy about Thunder, and just being yourself. You don't need to be someone else to fit in. And I thought when I signed for overseas, yeah, that maybe because I'm from a small town in the Free State in South Africa, that maybe I need to adjust something just to fit in. But yeah, that didn't need to happen. They accepted me just as I am or I was.
All right, finally down to the preview part of our podcast episode. We have 4 games. We'll start with Friday night in the Copper Box, 7 p.m. Sky Sports. It's a top of the table clash. We'll have Pulse versus Mavericks. Lucy, you're going to be commentating that game. Can I chuck it to you?
Yeah, I am. Me and the lovely Pamela Cookie going to be on that one, so very, very excited. For me, do you want a prediction? Am I giving a prediction or
just your thoughts?
If you're feeling brave.
Oh no, I won't give my prediction then. Thoughts? I think it's going to be a really intriguing game. I think it will either be incredibly close or it will be a bit of a blowout. I don't think there's going to be any middle ground. But the thing for me is that Mavericks in previous years have been London Pulse's bogey team. We've seen it, I think it was the last game of the 2023 and possibly 2024 season that they faced each other, and Mavericks came out with a win. And it was completely unexpected. I think it was actually Lindsay Keeble's her 250th NSL cap or something. I remember interviewing her, but it was Mavericks who came out of the win, and possibly Sasha Corbyn's retirement. I can't quite remember. But yeah, they are the bogey team. And so I'm curious to see whether that translates into 2025. I think we've got a plethora of matchups across the court. It's kind of hard to pinpoint where the game's going to be won or lost, but I think the shooting circle for Mavericks up against the defensive circle of Pulse, that is absolutely one I'm going to keep my eye on, particularly given how many attacking contacts the Mavericks attacking end had in the game against Rhinos. There was a point where Emily Andrew was kind of throwing her hands up in the air, like she couldn't understand why she kept getting these calls. So we know how tenacious and dogged the Pulse defence is. So that absolutely is going to be key for me. You've got Ellie Rattu as well coming up against her old side. I think her matchup with Tyler Orr is going to be really, really interesting. And then Liv Cheen, Razia Quashi. I mean, what's not to love about that, So yeah, a bit of a generic overview there, but I just think across all three sections of the court, there is going to be something that is going to be tantalising, and it will either be really close or a big scoreline.
Yeah,
very much
great. And a little asterisk for the injury of Chelsea Blackman. What Mavericks do with that, we haven't heard any news while we are recording this. So just to put that out there to the fans.
And also, as well, big shout out for London Pulse for managing to sell out. I believe it's the lower bowl of the Copper Box, which in itself is like 4,000 something. I think.
Yeah, I think there'll be at least 4,000 there, and I think having sold that out, the upper tier is open as well now for maybe kind of people rocking up on a Friday. So I think it'd be interesting to see how that goes. Good work, yeah, very good work.
Also on at the same time, Friday, House of Sport, 7 p.m, Sky Sports, you have Dragons versus Panthers. I'm going to take this one. Both teams looking for a win. And I don't think we can underestimate by round 3 what that feels like and what a driver that's going to be for these teams. I think we'll see. We don't know. I assume Gabby Marshall's going to be back. We don't know about Gabby Sinclair as well for Panthers, because I think we always have to keep saying like they are big players for Panthers are out. It will be an interesting one, as with what Lucy eloquently said about the game for round 2 for Dragons, that shooting circle when it comes up against Jazz Brown and Gabby Coffey. They were finding their feet, I think, in the Thunder game. We were starting to see what that looks like. Aliyah Zaranika was brilliant as well, I think, for Panthers. Another confusing substitution off. I didn't actually understand that during the game. Another thing that was going on in that game. So putting that up against Dragons' as attack and maybe seeing if they've learnt their lesson, I think is going to be quite crucial there for that one. So
I think this could be game of the round, I think this is going to be really, really interesting.
In what context? I think you're right. I think it'll be really tight, because I think both teams kind of will see this as a game they can win, and I think that kind of brings a different level of expectation. I think we would probably all agree that none of us could probably call it, but that in itself, I think, will make both teams think they can actually come away with what Chloe rightly points out is a much needed win at this stage of the season.
But I think the fact that both teams, I think, are still very much finding their feet in different areas of the court. Like, I think defensively for Panthers, like, you look at the names they've got in there, Jazz Brown and Gabby Coffey. Like, for me, that was the defensive pairing to keep an eye on at the start, like pre-season. I don't think we've seen the best of them yet by any stretch of the imagination. So I think they're still figuring out what their kind of setup and strategies and stuff are, particularly in Super Shot. Dragons are trying to figure out their attacking Super Shot strategy as well, and I think we haven't seen the best from either side, and I think this is going to be where both of them really, really hungry for the win. I'd be interested to see whether a home crowd for Dragons makes a difference.
We head to the Bellevue for another game on Friday. This time at 7:30 p.m. So it's a triple screen job for anybody that's going to try 2 or 3 at once. That's going to be on the BBC. It's Thunder versus Forest.
Yeah, I'll take this one. I've obviously watched Thunder in their first game properly. I think the second game I kind of spanned through a little bit, so I'm gonna watch this one sort of probably when I get home or over the weekend, because wife and daughter are heading off on various travels in the next few days. So I think this will be particularly interesting, partly because I think for Forest, I didn't make any secret of the fact I was a little bit disappointed by them in round one. I kind of got high hopes for them. I think they built a squad with good connections. Lucy, I think your point on the centre is going to be very interesting as the season evolves. I think Iona Christian would add so much to them as an attacking force, and this might not be the game to try it from the start, because obviously Thunder is such a well-established, and as Chloe has so excellently pointed out, like fearsome sort of smothering defence, that I feel like Forest will probably stick with what got them over the line in that sort of second game, and will look to build on it. Thunder will be Thunder, we know that. Probably no sign of players coming back yet. So I think they'll just look to build on what was a hugely impressive performance. I'm very keen to watch a little bit more of Anya Williams. I think she's another incredible young talent who we're going to see an awful lot of. Emma Rayner and Aaliyah McCormick have kind of slotted in with kind of no problems whatsoever. So I think Thunder's established sort of connections against what we think will be good connections in time for Forest is going to be really interesting. As I say, I was disappointed by Forest when they played Pulse, but they played well to get a win early under their belt. And anyone going to Bellevue and that drum, it's going to be difficult to deal with. But I think for Forest, it will be a really good assessment of actually, maybe the cobwebs have been blown away after round one, and it is round two what we're going to see a little bit more from them. So we know what we'll get from Thunder. I'm particularly interested to see what we'll get from Forest.
If Karen Gregg had Z Berger in her sights training this week, then I think Rolene is going to be at her sides.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I would wonder, given what we saw, what I tried to explain, I think Bree Grierson, buckle up, because she's going to be in for it as well. But notably also our winners from round two. So it will be a big momentum builder for both sides in that round as well. Perfect. Okay.
Should have pointed that out on Pulse Mavericks as well, actually. They're the two teams with a 100% record.
Yeah.
So only one team after 3 rounds will be perfect, which I think we probably all agree is a good thing. Like, we might have stumbled into it in the past with sort of a bigger league that maybe more teams were unbeaten or perfect after sort of a number of games. Last game in the round, Sunday in Leeds, First Direct Arena, 4:00 on Sky. Leeds Rhinos against Loughborough Lightning. Chloe, do you want to go first?
Yeah, the losers from round two, if I'm going to be putting it bluntly. Lots to be gained there, I think, for both sides. Probably, Rhinos so they'll probably feel quite up for it. Lightning, we said very between all of us, like, quite a disappointing performance. Be interesting to see what the latest is with Samantha Wallace-Joseph, as Lucy really I think put really well about from a playing welfare perspective, what that looks like for her. I think Rhinos, I think we'd all say they've been the surprise package so far of this season. So what a great test to really see where they stand with the reigning premiers, as it were. I reckon Jiva Mentor maybe didn't have the best game, I felt, in round two, but she had a great one in round one, not maybe the best one in round two. So it'd be interesting to see if she comes out in round three. That opportunity, I think, Cassie Howard to take out Hannah Joseph in a way that Zara Everett did is there, and I'm really curious to see how that goes. And yeah, Joyce Mavula will have to deal with Alice Harvey. So I think that one's going to be quite interesting too. How do you feel, Lucy?
Yeah, again, I think this is another really intriguing one because, like you say, rhinos are kind of the surprise delight of the season so far. And I think they absolutely will fancy their chances for sure. And I think we need to see, the important question for me is how do Lightning bounce back? They need to really start this game, I think, well. I do think Jiva Mentor, I don't know if I agree with you about her not necessarily having a great game in game two. I think she forced a lot of attacking turnovers from a Mavericks perspective. I don't know what she was doing on Emily Andrews' body, but my God, it was working. She turned over like four balls or so from attacking contact by Mavs. I think round one was probably better from her, but I thought she was pretty decent in round two. But I think Lightning will be back to normal. Can I say that's probably not the right word, but I think we'll see a different Lightning side.
I think Vic Burgess will have got into them. Her interview after the game I thought was really interesting. She was just like, we weren't at it. It wasn't good enough on every level. So I should imagine there's been hell to pay for them over the last week. And Rhinos might be on the end of that. But again, a little bit like Forest, I do think sort of seeing how a lead side who maybe now we've seen enough of them, along with sort of Forest, if you can kind of get into a run of form, will fancy their chances of maybe the fourth place in the top four. And this is obviously a very early prejudgment, being a little bit up for grabs. I think we would probably expect Pulse, Thunder and Lightning to be there. We'll see how that shakes out. But I do feel like the fourth spot is up for grabs. And I think Mavericks have probably shown up best so far. But also I think Leeds and Forest will think if they can get themselves together, they'll have a chance. Dragons, I think, are the team who probably at the moment we need to see a little bit more from. Doesn't mean they're not capable of it. But I just think for the time being, at least, it looks to me like they might just be a little bit short in that race. So for that, I do think this will be a good kind of litmus test for Rhinos. I'm in on them. I think they're a good side this year.
Great.
Okay, so we'll look forward to a review of round 3 in due course. Before we wrap up, just a couple of kind of bits and pieces of business. Firstly, shout out to George Fisher. Fantastic to see her out on court for Mav's next gen team. Given Mav's injury situations, if she makes a good comeback, it might not be too far away from seeing her on the court at some stage. But seriously, she's been through an awful lot. Fortunate enough that she came and did a coaching session for my daughter's team a couple of weeks ago, and the girls love her. She's such an engaging personality. The sport is better with George Fisher in it, and I think really good to see over the weekend.
Yeah, I actually got a bit emotional when I saw the news. And she played a quarter scoring 100% shooting accuracy. Yep. Can I just add that in there as well? That little mic drop moment. But yeah. I could not be more delighted for George. She is a very, very special person. So I'm thrilled for her.
Fantastic stuff. And I suppose also kind of tying into that, we'll get into sort of Suncorp netball in a couple of weeks' time, when we'll have a full-on preview. But some news from Australia. Ellie Cardwell suffered a pretty nasty injury. Looks like she's going to be out for a while, and having had injury problems last year, that is a concern, I think, for Ellie going forward, and maybe for England as well. I think they've been probably pretty fortunate in the fact that Liv Sheen has stepped up and grown and developed, but a fit Ellie Cardwell is something that is obviously an asset to sort of the Melbourne Mavericks and England. So it will be interesting to see how sort of she evolves. And then I suppose finally, as far as sort of major news lines are concerned, something interesting out of Birmingham, really, some significant investment, which is not terminology, Lucy, as I'm sure you'll attest. We're used to tying to netball teams and netball leagues. But yeah, I think, the devil will be in the detail in due course. But on the face of it, do we think this is a positive thing? It certainly sounds it.
Certainly sounds it. I think you're right. Devil in the detail. Knighthead Capital. So they're owners of Birmingham City Football Club have, yes, as you said, acquired a significant ownership stake in Panthers, I think as part of a wider city sort of Birmingham piece. I think there's other information about a cricket team there as well. Yeah, interesting. I think it's part of a wider pattern as well with football coming into netball. We've had rugby in netball. So interesting to see how football goes. And I think with the football element, it's how it reflects onto the performance of the teams, like how important are immediate results to these new clubs and these people putting their money forward. So that will be something I'm sure we'll see bear out going forwards. But yeah, something I'm keeping a little eye on there for sure.
Yeah, that Forest and Birmingham element of, now we know it's Birmingham City Football Club, and Forest obviously have put their name to the franchise. Lucy, as someone who's been around the game for a while, what is your take? We've seen sort of Rhinos come in, and I think are always really polished, really professional in how you work with them, and they obviously tap into the Rhinos side of things. We had Wasps for a period, and that fell away. Saracens sort of with Mavericks as well. What about this kind of football entry to the dance?
I love it. I mean, the proof will be in the pudding. Like, give it a few years down the line, we can review. But I think the fact that a sport that has so much money is coming into netball, I think it's fantastic, because I feel like organisations are slowly but steadily starting to realise now that there is huge potential in netball. Like, we've been banging this drum for God knows how many years now. Claire Nelson bangs this drum to her heart's content. But it feels like people are finally now starting to actually put their money where their mouth is and invest in it. And long may it continue. I think it's fantastic.
So that's our little news roundup at the end. Chloe, we got one or two questions?
Yes, Paul, we have some questions for Lucy, kindly from our Instagram followers. If you're not following us on there, get involved. You're missing out. In the words of Tanya Obst, get involved. For those that know. Lucy, what are you looking forward to the most for the season to come?
I'm still trying to get over the fact that someone's got questions for me. I have to say as well, coming on to this following Sam Berg, Karen Gregg and Claire Jones, I mean, I feel like you're slumming it with me a little bit, but I've enjoyed myself immensely. What am I most looking forward to for this season, the rest of the season to come?
Yeah.
Oh, I am looking forward to seeing the growth of the teams throughout the season, because I think, particularly with how many times we talk about the super shot, but particularly with the introduction of the super shot, and as teams face each other once and then face each other again, I always love seeing the turnarounds and the learnings that are taken from each game, and see who's got the kind of, I suppose, like the grittiness or the nous, I guess, to be able to turn a result around and to learn from previous performances. So yeah, the growth and the journeys of all of the teams for me is something that I love, and the storylines that come out of that.
A beautiful answer.
Oh, thank you.
Threw that out there and you just caught it beautifully. Okay, here's another one. Here's the other one for you. Who do you think the favourites to win the Super League are?
I think widespread public opinion is London Pulse this year. I think sort of Tamsin kind of alluded to it on the Off the Court podcast as well with Fumi Fidoji this week, which big shout out to Sky for all of the off court stuff that they're putting on as well. Definitely give it a listen. It feels like Pulse's year, having been, I mean, I hate the phrase, but so many times been the bridesmaid and never the bride. I hate that saying, but it does sort of sum it up. You kind of feel the way that they've invested in the youth over the years, it feels like now, particularly with certain players, they are blooming, and that investment is starting to pay off. Like Liv Cheen is the prime example of that. She's gone from someone who would play, I would argue, a fairly one-dimensional game. She only used to like to shoot under the post. Now she'll shoot from frickin' anywhere. Her movement is really dynamic. She's really taken on a leadership role, I think, within that attacking end. That investment is now, we're getting a return on it, essentially. So yeah, I think, and with the injection of Gracie Smith, I think she's still a bit of an unknown. I think she could be a really profound impact player at times. Because I think, like Sam said in the interview that you did with her, she is another little plug. There you go.
Have to get a
She
little bell
is,
for whenever we plug something.
yeah. She's more advanced than you would expect for someone who is so young. Physically, she is like huge, nearly 6 foot or whatever she is, but also mentally, I think she's really quite mature. So yeah, seeing the impacts that she can have on their season, and whether she does take to the court in any of those big games, or there's just so many interesting things to look forward to. But I think general public opinion is that London Pulse are the favourites this year.
And it's your opinion, not just the public's. That's what we're saying.
My opinion, I hate having to call it. I don't know if I can call it. Let's just say I wouldn't be surprised if Pulse did it. And I kind of want it for them because it's, brand new team winning it. Like, it's a great storyline, right?
We do like storylines. We do like
we do. That's it. We do like storylines. That's it.
That it from a questions point of view?
That is it. Yeah.
Excellent.
I think that was
good. Means we can bring this show to a close finally. So look, listen, I think as far as I'm concerned, I think it's another weekend to look forward to, like round 3 in the Super League. We'll all be at a game, which I think is in itself always pretty exciting. It's always good to go. It's good to see the sport kind of hopefully continuing to grow in leaps and bounds this season. And yeah, before we know it, we're going to kind of get to round 5, 6, and 7, and we're going to be halfway through this league, and we'll be able to form some kind of real opinions on sort of top fours. But hopefully you've enjoyed what we've kind of had to say today. A massive thank you to our guest, Lucy Goodman. Hope you've enjoyed it.
I love it. I'm just still surprised that you'd want me on. I hope I've been interesting enough for people. I'm just a netball fan at the end of the day. I just feel like I'm one of the crowd, like
a netball fan that's worked really, really, really hard. So I'll take that. Thank you very much for coming on. We really appreciate your insights, and good luck with the commentary at the weekend.
Thank you. And I have to say thank you to you guys as well for creating this podcast. I think it's very much needed in the netball space, and I also know, having done 3 seasons of Quarter Time podcasts, how much work goes into something like this. So I take my hat off to you. 3 seasons is quite enough for me, and I'm absolutely thrilled to be able to have another podcast to add to my listen list. So thank you guys for what you're doing, because it is outstanding work.
Thank you very much. Well, look, I mean, that's lovely of you to say. And as we said at the top, we've been kind of blown away by the early support. It's very much the start. We'll hopefully get bigger and we'll get better, but we only do that by kind of hearing from you guys. So whether it's questions, whether it's kind of DMs about journalistic aspirations, as has been the case this week, we'd love to hear from you. So usual rules apply. Like us, follow us, share us, drop us our ratings and reviews. It all helps. And we'll keep talking. Thanks to Lucy. Thanks to you, Chloe. And we'll see you next time.